Good morning. We'll call to order this session of the workshop for the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. This morning we have several new faces to introduce, and so I'll do that to start out this morning. To my left is Joanna Collins. She's with the Department of Education as a staff attorney. To my right is Susan Liverman, and she also works for the State Department in the Policy and External Affairs, admin support to the State Textbook Commission. Rebecca Wright is rejoining us today, and it's good to see her again. Allison Gower. Allison's on the front row down here, and she is the new Monty Wilson, who you all know as Monty. She's her title is the Director of Content for the Tennessee Department of Education. So welcome, Allison. And I also want to acknowledge Jason Vance. Jason is a commissioner, and he was unable to be with us the first meeting a few weeks or months ago. And so, Jason, if you want to tell us about yourself and your representation on the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jason Vance. I'm from Loudoun County Schools. I'm the superintendent in Loudoun County and want to represent our school system as a superintendent and also other superintendents across the state along with Ms. Bunch. I'm excited about being here and I appreciate the opportunity. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the just the exciting things going on in the great state of Tennessee.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Vance. Item 2 on our agenda for the workshop is Cycle A Update State Review Process. And Dr. Tammy Shelton with the State Department of Education will speak to this.
Thank you, Commissioner Hammond. So behind tab 1 in your notebooks, you will see a copy of the Schedule A agenda. This is the adoption cycle for advanced manufacturing, information technology, human services, and education and training. So a cluster of CTE courses. If you will notice, I'll just kind of briefly talk you through this schedule as to what we have already completed and where we're at to date, and then where we will be moving forward past today. So if you'll notice on this schedule, any comments or areas that are in red are commission meeting dates for you. Any comments on here in blue are State Board of Education meeting dates, and anything that's in bold on this timeline is information that is pertinent to publishers. So if you'll notice on the first page, you had your last commission meeting on March the 3rd. Shortly, and at that meeting, you approved the advisory panelists, teachers from across our state that reviewed these CTE textbooks. Those reviewers were trained on May 2nd and 3rd on the rubric that they used to score those books. Then they immediately started reviewing the textbooks that were assigned to them. Each teacher taught or has expertise in the area for the specific books that they reviewed. June 8th, if you'll notice I'm down towards the bottom of the first page, was the due date for public comments that would be in time to be submitted for Section 1 reviews to the reviewers and the commission. Of course, we still took public comments after that date, but that was the deadline to be able to get those comments to the reviewers in time for them to be able to incorporate them into their reviews for Section 1. Public comments, if you want to notate on this timeline, are behind tab 7, and I will mention that again later in the meeting of your binder. June 8th and 9th were the due dates for Section 1, which is the non-negotiables, or the area that has the most important content that the reviewers are looking for. June 15th was the deadline for the panelist reviews to be submitted to the publishers. That information is behind tab 6, which we will also look at and review later on in the meeting. On the back of the timeline, or on page 2 of the timeline, August 7th was the deadline for public comments that could be included to the reviewers and the commission for Section 2 of the review. August 14th was the deadline for publishers to submit revised content. So the review is done in a two-phase cycle. So the reviewers take the textbooks and they look for section 1 on the rubric, and that's the most important alignment to the standards, rigor, those sorts of things. So during that, when they finish section 1 review, that information is given to the publishers, and the publishers have a set time frame that they can revise their textbooks if they choose and resubmit them to the reviewers to where they have fixed content based on what the reviewers saw. August 15th was a publisher hearing. So out of Section 1 reviews, there were three books and 2 publishers that chose to revise or resubmit content. And August 15th, those publishers came and presented to the reviewers of those specific books. 3 books were presented from 2 publishers. 1 book did pass after the revisions were made, after the reviewers evaluated the revisions. August the 28th was the final advisory panelist. So this was the final for section 1 and 2, and information on August 28th was shared with publishers. So they knew if their book would be recommended by the advisory panelists to the commission. That information, all of the reviews from section 1 and 2 are behind tab 6 in your binder, and I'll give you some specific information later on in the meeting on what you find behind tab 6. September 4th was the deadline for publishers to actually write a written response to the reviews. That information is also in your binder behind tab 6, and that brings us up to today, which is the 18th meeting. And then moving forward, on the 28th, you will be presented the official list and recommendation from the reviewers. And then after your vote on the 28th, that official list would go to the State Board of Education in October. At that point, then districts would start this whole process at the district level.
Okay, so Cycle A is, we've been reviewing career and technical education, instructional materials, and just kind of summarizing what you said there. We had quality and qualified reviewers that were installed. They began reviewing. We received some public comments. Can you speak about the nature of the comments and the action of the reviewers, et cetera?
Okay, so we actually had 1 public comment at this time for this cycle, and that public comment was on a book called Parents and Their Children. That is behind tab 7, the 1 comment. The book that the comment was made on did not pass section 1. So that book will not be on the official list that is recommended to the commission by the advisory panelist. And you can read those comments behind tab 7.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Shelton? Yes, sir, Mr. Mallory.
What was the change? Why didn't it pass?
So you can read the review more in detail. There's quite a few reviews. It's behind tab 6. And so it did not meet the recommendations on the rubric. So I would have to go back and specifically read that particular rubric to see why it did not pass. But it is in your binder, and I would be glad to pull it out after the meeting and point out that particular one. But the title of that book is Parents and Their Children, and it was by Goodhart Wilcox, was the publisher.
And it didn't pass.
It did not pass section 1.
Could I ask the commissioners to please kind of tilt your name tense as I'm still getting used to everybody's name. Thank you very much. Dr. Kirk, I know first names, but I want to go by titles here. Thank you. Dr. Kirk.
Dr. Shelton, could you share with us just a little bit about what phase 1, what the first phase of the rubric does, how how books either make it or don't make it at that point?
Yeah. So phase one is looking for section one on the rubric, and that the content of the rubric changes depending on the academic content area that you're reviewing. So even for these particular CTE courses, there was some slight differences in the rubric. So you had advanced manufacturing, information technology, human services, education, and training. And so in each of those areas, you're going to be looking for something specific to that content area. So it depends on which rubric you happen to be looking at. We would create a new rubric for each cycle and might have multiple rubrics depending on the content area. But generally the things that you're going to see in section one, depending on which content area, is alignment to the standards, one of the most important things that we're looking for. Looking for rigor to the textbook, and then it provides those instructional strategies and things that teachers need to be able to reach all students. Section two is things that are more user-friendly for the teacher. So it would be having additional supports that are not necessarily necessary, but really help a teacher in that. Things like the ease of use for teachers, things that it is, the graphics are grade appropriate for the students, those sorts of things. So section one is the most important thing we're looking for, which is alignment to the standards and the rigor that the standards call for.
Thank you, Dr. Shelton. Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Mallory?
Just, I'm not too as concerned about the mechanical and the technical, but the parent and the parent one and the human services. Is there any review far as like inappropriate or controversial rubric did you look at or anything? We've had a lot of comments about inappropriate material in our textbook, especially social studies, and this kind of falls in that line.
So you have the reviews behind tab 6, and of course more than welcome and encouraged to read all of those reviews independently. I've scanned through them, but I do not want to summarize the comments of the reviewers. They are the experts in that content area. I'm not an expert in any of these CTE courses, so I think it would be best to actually read their comments to just kind of do a general high-level answer to your question. I didn't see anything specifically that used the language that you just use in reviews.
And I would add, Mr. Mallory, that we approve the rubrics that they use to review, and so when we're looking at a rubric, currently, if I remember correctly, in the rubric we ask reviewers to flag potentially sensitive information. Yeah, and that's the mechanism built in there, and if it doesn't pass cycle one, the reviewers might not get to that stage where they might actually start flagging the material. But that's how we currently have it have it built in to where the reviewers look for that type of material. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. We got something that's going to pick out those sensitive materials that could inflame, be inappropriate, whatever the words you want to use. So we have that built in, and our reviewers are looking for it, and so we have that safeguard.
Yes, sir. And they're doing that and have done that in the reviews, and we'll have a list by the next commission meeting to say yes or no for on the 28th.
And it appears that one of these books may have had that problem. And it didn't get approved. That's what I got that impression, but.
Yes, sir. The public review that was received, they had some issues with the book, which are in there in the tab, and that book did not pass phase one. But the book didn't pass phase one because it didn't meet the criteria for phase one. All right. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. Dr. Shelton's going to continue presenting on the revised textbook adoption cycle.
Thank you. So you have behind tab 2 and also behind tab 4, it's the exact same thing. One tab is for the workshop and one tab is for the meeting. A proposal for a revised textbook cycle. So historically, in Tennessee, we did textbook adoption every 6 years for each content area. Historically, standards were reviewed the year before those standards started the textbook process. In Tennessee, we have, in the past several years, adopted multiple standards within the same year. In doing that, that threw the 6-year cycle kind of out of alignment. And so we then had textbooks that weren't aligned to standards and so forth, and all of you are very aware of the way we've adopted standards the last few years in our state off-cycle. So in doing that, the textbook cycle was actually updated multiple times over the last 3 years. There have been 3 or 4 different cycle revisions that have happened with the commission. So in doing that, and each time that happened, and then each time we've had a new adoption of standards, or we started looking at standards at an odd timeline, it just really kept getting the cycle kind of out of sync. So what I have put before you is a completely new cycle. So there's really no way to compare the cycle that is current and this cycle because there are quite a few changes. So what I would like to do is just to talk you through this cycle. This actually goes through 11 years. And so one of the things, too, I want to point out before we start looking at this cycle is that science was actually up to start in the next cycle this fall. We do not currently have new science standards adopted due to our legislation this past session. The science standards will go through a new cycle, which is really great and adds several layers to standards adoption. Therefore, we will not have the science standards ready this fall, so we do have to have some type of a new cycle so we know what we can put forth to publishers immediately or this fall. So what you're looking at first on the first page says Cycle 1. This would include the next 5 years. I would actually like to start the conversation. Oh, yes. Behind tab 2. It's horizontal, and it's made with an Excel spreadsheet, so it's a chart that you're looking at. So Cycle 1 is the next 5 years, but I would like to start the conversation with Cycle 2, which will be the second page, and that'll be the preceding 6 years. It'll be after Cycle 1. So what you're looking at with Cycle 2 is what I would call an ideal cycle for districts, for school districts. So if you look at this cycle, what you're going to see is Section A is a light year. You're looking at some CTE courses and some computer application keyboarding courses. So that when I say light year, I'm talking about a budget year for a district. It's not a heavy budget year on a district. The next 2 years, you're going to see science and social studies. Those are heavy budget years for districts. They're costly. Then you're going to have a light year, PE, wellness, fine arts, and some arts and technical and communications in the CTE area. And then 2 heavy years, ELA and mathematics. So what this cycle does is it breaks up some of the budget concerns for districts. So you have 2 heavy years, 1 light year, 2 heavy years, 1 light year. Also, the 4 main academic subject areas, ELA, math, science, and social studies, those are heavy adoption years. Those span K-12. It's all the grade levels, and there's a lot of material to review for districts. So those are heavy, not only capacity with their people, but also budget. So it spreads that out. Another thing that this cycle does is it aligns content in CTE with content in the academic areas. So if you'll notice in the second and third column, you have alignment between content areas. So, for example, in Section B, where you see science, the CTE courses up that year are health science, agriculture, and STEM. So they match that content. During Section C, where you have social studies, you have law, public safety, those sorts, government, the classes that align with social studies. So it does an alignment with standards that have similar content for those districts. So this is what I would call an ideal cycle for districts. This cycle was also put before the Superintendent Study Council, and they had a few questions, but they pretty much all said that they liked this ideal cycle, that they thought it would work for their districts, and there are 2 superintendents on the council and would in a minute be glad to hear your thoughts on this. So that would be ideal. So if we flip back and look at Cycle 1, we have to do some cleanup to get to that ideal situation. And in order to do that cleanup, you're going to have some subjects that are on a 5-year cycle. You may have to have some subjects that are on a 7-year cycle. So the next 5 years, which is section B through F, actually cleans up this cycle so we can get to that ideal situation. If you'll notice B, which would actually be what we're proposing that would start this fall, you're going to have several career and technical education courses. The agriculture, foods and nutrition, STEM and health science would not have a change in cycle B because science is going to move up to be with those courses. But the transportation, distribution, logistics, architecture and construction would actually roll up to A, which was that light year, because it could actually handle some more standards. So I'm not going to go through each one, but you can read the rest of them and see you're going to have some changes. Science would be on a 5-year review, this one time only. PE wellness and fine arts would be on a 7-year review, this one time only. So, and you can see the others, and it states specifically if it would be a 5 or 7 year. That cleanup over the next 5 years would get us to the ideal situation. This is also went before state board, and it is aligned to their current adoption cycle for standards.
So, Dr. Shelton, we're on cycle A, and we would be looking at the next go-round being on cycle B, but science would not be the next B. It would be 5 years from then. Assuming standards are approved relatively soon, within the next year or two, would that be problematic? Could we bump it back up?
So actually, science would be in cycle C, which is next year. So next fall, the fall of 2016, we would start the science cycle. The science standards currently with state board are slated to go for first read in July and second read in October of 2016. So we would have new science standards approved through state board if everything goes on the state board timeline accordingly. In October of 2016, the standards are due to publishers in December of 2015. And I would like to add one comment. I apologize that I forgot. Pre-K is actually added to this cycle, and we have not had pre-K in textbook adoption previously. It is in D. The reason pre-K is not split out amongst the content areas is because pre-K's content comes in a package program, not in specific content areas. And so pre-K is its own content subject area here for everything, which includes math, science, social studies, ELA, and social emotional content as well. So I apologize that I left that off.
And in cycle B coming up next would be the what's in the column 2 there: agriculture, food and natural resources, etc.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to commend Dr. Shelton and State Board of Education in regards to the cycle. I like it. I think it makes common sense for school districts, especially in the way it's structured for the heavier adoption years. And while we would like to move more in a technological form, if you have to purchase the hard textbooks, I think this makes great sense, and I appreciate the work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Bunch.
may I add that I like the alignment with CTE to academics. CTE has been trying to do this for quite some time, and it makes perfect sense now that what we're doing in core courses in CTE can feed off of each other and work together in team partnerships to benefit the child, whether it's in middle school or in high school or whatever. So good job that you all have done.
Thank you. And we did collaborate with CTE on this cycle as well.
Mr. Mallory.
I actually do like a lot of things. I have a suggestion here is that for the social studies, is that with the mess that our social studies books are in at this point in time, could we have some type of supplemental material or something to fix some of our issues? Would that be something possible?
Dr. Kurt.
If I may speak on behalf of the department, and I'm going to talk about this later, social studies standards will be reviewed beginning in January of 2016. So it would be prudent actually to keep this in the way that it is so that there will be revisions We are certain of that. And once those revisions are made, then we'll have textbooks that align to those standards. But currently, it would be costly for districts, and the standards are what they are until the revision happens. There's a process that it has to go through.
Dr. Kirk, how long does the standards review process for social studies last, beginning in January?
It will open in January, and the board will vote, the state board will vote on those standards in December of 2017.
All right, and has the department aligned this schedule with D?
Yes.
That's going to roll around
Yes,
about
sir.
the right time?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mallory?
Yeah, so we're not getting any new social studies materials for another 5 years, is the way I read this. Correct?
Yes, that's the time that Dr. Kirk's saying the standards are going to be under review.
What I'm saying is we maybe some of our social studies, specifically maybe 7th grade, could have some type of workbook or materials, something in the meantime. I'm not talking about a whole textbook. I'm talking about maybe a small workbook to improve some of our materials.
I'll speak to that, and then somebody else may want to. But each district, could evaluate whether or not they would like to continue with their current book that they've selected from the list, or switch to another, or communicate with the publisher about supplemental materials. Most books have it, and sometimes the district purchases, sometimes they don't. But yes, I think, if that's a concern in districts as their current resource, they could certainly review their options. And if they don't find any acceptable on the list, do a waiver. Yes, sir. Dr. Kirk?
One other option that's available to districts is that the scope and sequence is entirely up to locals. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on things you don't want to spend a lot of time on, and you can spend more time on the things that you want to spend more time on. That is a local decision.
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Shelton on this cycle revision? This is really important, and I believe we'll be voting for it in the actual meeting here in a few moments. Any questions? Did you want to say something else on that, Dr. Shelton?
I was just going to say, in regards to supplemental material, districts can purchase supplemental materials that are not from the publisher or their basal. So the basal is what you approve on the official list of textbooks. That's the primary program that districts are saying they're going to use to teach their students. However, districts can purchase any supplemental materials that they choose, so it's totally up to the district if they do find an additional workbook, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through the publisher that their basal is through. So they do have multiple options from multiple sources during this gap time period.
Mr. Mallory?
So it's appropriate for a local to go out and find something else that we haven't approved and go ahead and buy it anyway. It's supplemental material.
I think so long as it's categorized or seen as supplemental materials and not the official source for the adopted textbook of the district. Would that be
correct.
Everyone's understanding from the State Department? Dr.
That's correct.
Shelton? Yes.
And that's what I'm hearing from a lot of folks is that there's a lot of blame. There's kind of a blame game going on right now. The State Department say it's the locals' responsibility, and the locals say no. The department is giving us this. This is what's been approved. So it's a finger pointing thing. And then, guys, I'm just being blunt about the situation. So.
Yes, sir. And the reality is, all across the state, teachers pull in supplemental materials every day that are never reviewed by anyone, and so a lot of trust is extended to our teachers, and I think that's good to have that freedom, but we do have to we put a lot of faith in teachers as to the content of those supplemental materials. Mr. Vance?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Mr. Mallory's comments and think it's a real issue that we're dealing with across all of our districts in the state of Tennessee. And I appreciate Dr. Kirk's comments about how it is a local decision, and we've certainly got the right to supplement that in a way that we see fit. And want to reiterate what you said, and the fact that we put a lot of faith in teachers. We've got teachers who do a great job, and I respect the decisions that they're making, and think with local support that we can make a common sense decision that fits the state of Tennessee. And so I'm proud to hear the comments that I'm hearing this morning, and believe with all my heart that we're going to do what's right by kids.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. Any other, Mr. Mallory?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is we need to find out. I think there's some confusion out there, and I'm just I'm throwing it out there, so we'll know who. I don't think a lot of the locals, not just one or two, but a lot of the locals don't understand that process, or at least that's what I'm hearing from across the state. I'm done.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, the September 18th, today's meeting agenda items, Dr. Shelton.
Okay, your agenda is in the front pocket of your binder. The first agenda is the workshop that we are coming to a close on. Page 2 and 3 is the meeting agenda. Item 1 on the meeting agenda is welcome and introductions, which will be from Chairman Hammond. Item 2 is the consent items. This will be a voice vote. Item A is the adoption of the agenda, and item B is approval of your April 20th, 2015 meeting minutes. Item 3 on the agenda is the action items, which will require a roll call vote. Item A under action items is approval of Susan Liverman as the recording secretary for the commission. Item B will be approval of the revised textbook adoption cycle on first and final read. Item C will be approval of the revised textbook commission substitution rule. The fourth thing will be presentations. We'll have Section A advisory panelist review that I will go over for you. We will have then the public comment section, and after that we do have 2 requests to speak. Section 5 will be announcement and notices for the commission, and then of course at the end if you have other business.
Thank you, Dr. Shelton, for everything this morning. If there are no questions for Dr. Shelton, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then so we're gonna begin the commission meeting in let's just say 9:20. 9:20 we'll call to order the commission meeting. Thank you. Okay, we need to call to order. I've got 21 after. Good morning and welcome to this morning's State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission meeting. I'd like to first recognize Dr. Vicki Kirk, Department Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the Tennessee Department of Education, for roll call. Dr. Kirk.
Ms. Bryant?
If you would click on and say here for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the roll call. Ms. Bunch?
Here.
Dr. Campbell?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Dr. Hammond?
Here.
I am here. Mr. Mallory?
Here.
Ms. Nash?
Here.
Dr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Vance?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 present and you have a quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk. And welcome everyone to our meeting. I also want to highlight some new faces to our meeting this morning. Joanna Collins, to my left, is a staff attorney for the Tennessee Department of Education. Susan Liverman is to my right, and she also works for the Tennessee Department of Education as the Policy and External Affairs and Administrative Support to the Textbook Commission. Rebecca Wright is here from the Tennessee Department of Education. Allison Gower, who is the Director of Content for the Tennessee Department of Education, is here and will be recognized later. And also, if you were not here at this morning's workshop, Mr. Jason Vance, who is a superintendent of Loudoun County, Tennessee, and he was a commissioner not present at our first meeting. So welcome, Mr. Vance, and welcome to all of you. It's great to see everyone this morning. In terms of our opening remarks, we're in our Cycle A, which primarily consists of career and technological education textbooks. We're in the midst of that cycle, and so we'll be moving forward with that direction today with our meeting. We also have a couple of community members who've asked to speak, and so we welcome them. Look forward to hearing from them a little bit later in the meeting. We're on to item 2. These are consent items, so we'll have a voice vote. The adoption of our agenda. The agenda was reviewed this morning by Dr. Shelton, and you have it in front of you. It's in your folder in the front pocket. Just make sure you're looking at the commission meeting agenda. Do we have a motion to approve our agenda this morning?
I'll make that motion, but I would like to talk about it just for a second on when we go to second.
I second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Not opposed. I think some of our guests will probably be here around 10:30 or 11. That's what they're coming in from some places. I hope we'll still be in session.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure. Not sure that we'll. Hopefully, we will be. Hopefully, we'll be, and we'll keep an eye on the agenda. And that's unfortunate that they're not here. I think that was communicated.
Wasn't communicated. I thought we had a morning and an afternoon session. Is what what I was thinking. So anyway.
At the last at the last meeting,
I must have missed that. My bad.
Yes, sir. At the last meeting, we voted to have the commission meeting happen right after the workshop meeting, and also to start earlier in the day. And so that's what we did. And we definitely want to go back and check to see those communications with our presenters this morning, and realize they're coming from from distances. So hopefully it won't be an issue that we'll still be meeting. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll continue with the meeting at this time. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
When we have a recess, I'll make a phone call. And if we have another recess during this meeting, I'll make a phone call and find out their location.
Yes, Mr. Mallory, there's no planned recesses. If you can text message right now or something, that would be great. See if you can get in touch with them. Moving on to item 2, item B of number 2, approval of the April 20th, 2015 meeting minutes. Dr. Vicki Kirk, the Commissioner's Designee, Department of Education, will speak to this.
Behind tab 3, you have the minutes from the April 20th meeting. Has everyone had time to review those? Mr. Chairman, if everyone has had time to review the minutes, we can take a vote to approve.
Would anybody like more time to review the minutes? Dr. Campbell.
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that approves the April 20th, 2015 meeting minutes. We had a voice vote on the adoption of the agenda, and I think it would probably be best at this time to go back to that. I think there could be some ambiguity about our order, and I would like to hear from some other commission members as to whether or not we will postpone the meeting if the speakers are going to be significantly late, or we should continue on with the meeting. And anyhow, we need to adopt the agenda as it is. Let's have some discussion on that, and Mr. Mallory, I think, is going to start.
Yeah, we have one person here already. I just saw her walk in.
Okay, that's good. That helps solve that issue. Any other comments on that? Again, we're discussing whether or not we will wait for another speaker, or if we will, if they were not here and we finished the meeting, whether we would ask them to come present at a later, the meeting on the 28th, for example.
Mr. Chairman, since we have one of our speakers here, let's proceed with our agenda and let our speaker that's here begin, and then we'll see where we are with time.
Okay, so I'd like to conduct that voice vote again, just to adopt the agenda, and whoever's here to continue on as planned. Is there a second? And did I get your motion correct, Ms. Bunch, on that one? Okay, does anyone second that?
I'll second.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so our agenda for today is accepted, and we're going to continue on with whoever is here to present at the time that they are on the agenda. Thank you for that clarification. We're on item number 3. These are action items. There'll be a roll call vote as to their approval. And the first is to whether or not to approve Susan Liverman as recording secretary. And so Susan is here to my right. She works for the Tennessee Department of Education and will be serving for the Textbook Commission as recording secretary. And if there are no questions by any commission members, I'm going to ask Dr. Kirk to do a roll call vote on whether or not to approve Susan Liverman as recording secretary. Dr. Kirk. Or discussion, Mr. Mallory.
Could you introduce yourself to us, please? Yeah, just talk to us about yourself.
Ms. Liverman, if you would use the microphone.
Yes, I'm Susan Liverman. I work for the Tennessee Department of Education. I work in the Office of Policy and External Affairs, and I've been providing administrative support to the Textbook Commission.
Thank you.
We'll hear any motions to have this vote, first of all. Any motion to approve Susan Liverman?
Mr. Chairman, I found Ms. Liverman to be very professional and a great representative of Tennessee. I'd make a motion that we approve her as secretary.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Kirk, for the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Vance? Aye. Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Aye.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Aye.
Dr. Robinson?
Aye.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
I vote yes. Dr. Hammond?
Yes.
Yes. It is unanimous.
Thank you. Ms. Liverman is approved as our recording secretary. Action item B is to approve the revised textbook adoption cycle, first and final read. Dr. Tammy Shelton, Tennessee Department of Education, is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Hammond. Behind tab 4, you have the revised proposal, draft revised textbook cycle. It spans the next 11 years. I did give a brief update on that cycle during the workshop. I'll give a very, very quick summary. Schedules B through F on cycle 1 is basically a cleanup. You will have some content areas that have 5-year cycle and some with a 7. After that initial 5-year cleanup, the next 6 years would start the actual, what I would call ideal cycle that will help districts out with budget. You would have 2 heavy years budget-wise, 1 light year budget-wise. You'll also see in those 6 years in that cycle an alignment between CTE content and academic content so that similar content areas are adopted on the same year. You also see pre-K added to the cycle, which we have not had in the past under the Textbook Commission's responsibility. I would like to ask the Commission to approve this new cycle on first and final read.
Okay, comments or questions for Dr. Shelton? Mr. Mallory.
Yeah, I'm going to vote no on this until we have a cleanup of. I can't wait 5 years for social studies to be revised. I think that we can work with this if we can have some type of plan to fix some of the social studies material that's going into the classroom. And I also say, I don't know if it's appropriate or not. We have a couple of state reps here that I don't know if they'd be willing or would like to comment on this to the commission. But I think that since we have 2 state representatives here, that would be something appropriate to ask.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or any other discussion? Would anyone else like to hear from state representatives on the commission? Dr. Robinson.
Chairman, I'm not really sure why we need to go away from this schedule. And Kyle, if you would explain that, because from what I understand, that the systems at this point have the materials in their hands that they've already purchased, and they do have that freedom whether to use those materials or to find supplemental materials. When I was a teacher in the classroom, a lot of freedom was given to me on whether I would teach a specific lesson or so. I would just like some clarification of that.
I think this is almost perfect. Okay, but I just really think if we could have some type of supplemental material that we maybe have, and maybe that we don't even, maybe this schedule is good, but kind of like an addendum, maybe for next meeting that we look at doing some type of supplemental material for 7th grade social studies, that we adopt some type of workbook or something, or a fix for our social studies curriculum in that grade level.
Mr. Chairman, and please clarify this for me, and I totally understand what Mr. Mallory is saying, but the systems themselves, or maybe one of the directors of schools, the system themselves could find supplemental materials themselves if they don't feel those social studies textbooks represent the values of their community. Am I correct? Or
Yes.
the state, the values of the state.
Yes, sir. Dr. Robinson, that was my understanding from the workshop, and I don't know if Dr. Kirk would be willing to speak to that again.
Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to speak as a superintendent. We can and we do. And my understanding, not just as a superintendent, but as one who has also been an assistant commissioner in the department where Dr. Kirk and Dr. Shelton are right now, to do as Mr. Mallory is asking would be to open up another cycle of workbook adoption for social studies, because the department cannot just choose a vendor to provide that service. The department cannot show favoritism to one vendor over another. And I think, right now we have a standards, if we have any problem at all, we have a standards problem more than we have a textbook problem. And I don't think our commission can fix that. We're not the entity to fix that. And others higher than us have that ability to do that. And I understand where Mr. Mallory is coming from, and I know that other teachers across this state are struggling with this, but I know that in a system there are supervisors of instruction and superintendents and principals who can be very good resources for them if they'll just go to them and ask for that help. And perhaps, perhaps we all need to get our heads together and look independently for those good resources and start sharing them out in our specific study councils and regions so that everyone will know what other good resources there are. But I just don't think we're the committee to do that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bunch. Mr. Mallory, and then I have something to say to maybe hopefully summarize this.
Yeah, I just don't think that if there's a plan, then okay, find it. This is okay, but we need some type of addendum or some type of plan. Maybe the plan is some type of commission, or maybe not a commission, or some committee or something of that nature that the department can organize to fix this seventh grade issue. Fine, put that as part of this. And I would disagree with you. I think there's a materials problem more than a standards problem. That's I've taught seventh grade. I got this. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. We adopted an agenda, and we need to stick to each action item as it comes. And so the discussion that's happening now is about the revised cycle. And I want to remind everyone about our workshop agenda, in which Dr. Kirk said that social studies standards were being reviewed in January, and that under the new cycle, there will be alignment as soon as those standards are finalized. The textbook adoption cycle will take place immediately after, which means we'll have textbooks aligned to our standards. And so this cycle that we're looking at right now, if we're just focusing on this, this would align those efforts. And any problems that are found in textbooks that are already on a list that have been approved, that's not what's on the agenda right now. It is strictly the cycle that will be aligned with the new standards for social studies when they come out. And again, that review begins in January. At this time, we'll take any motion on whether or not to approve the cycle as it's been put forth by Dr. Shelton.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the new revised textbook adoption cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Is anyone second?
I'll
Ms.
second.
Cruz. Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on Ms. Liverman for a roll call vote.
Mr. Vance,
Yes.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
No.
Ms. Cruz,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Bryant,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
and Chairman Hammond.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Okay, thank you. The revised textbook adoption cycle on first and final read has been passed. Item C is the is to approve the revised textbook commission substitution rule, and this is for first read. Dr. Tammy Shelton, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Chairman Hammond. The substitution rule basically states the publishers can substitute a newer version of a textbook that is on the official list that they are contracted with. The amendment to the language here that we're proposing basically is just there are two things. One is just a cleanup of language. So if you notice, it is behind tab 5. If you'll notice at the top, the cleanup of the language basically is removing the wording that says that the 2 books would have to have the same copyright date. So if a publisher is proposing a new edition of the book, of course, it has new content, they want to use the current copyright date. So it's just basically striking that small language there from the rule. If you'll also notice the one additional thing in this rule, you will see that 3 basically is stating that publishers could not submit a substitution 12 months before the expiration of their contract. So in thinking about that, we would actually be in the process of reviewing those books for the next list and the next cycle during that time frame. So if a publisher did have a newer edition, it should be going through the more lengthy process that you have put in place to review that content, not circumventing around the process and just submitting their book through a substitution. They would need to go through that lengthy review process that you approve.
Questions for Dr. Shelton? Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Any second?
I'll second the motion to approve.
Thank you. Ms. Liverman will do a roll call vote.
Mr. Vance,
Yes.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Bryant, Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Chairman Hammond.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The revised textbook commission substitution rule at first read is approved. We are moving on to item 4 of our agenda, presentations. The first will be Section A, Advisory Panelists Reviews. Dr. Shelton from the Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Chairman Hammond. Behind tab 6, it's the largest section in your notebook. There's quite a bit of material there. So I basically want to just talk you through what you have behind tab 6 so that you can, at your own time, review that material before the meeting on the 28th. So the first thing that you're going to see behind tab 6 is a list of the names of the advisory panelists that you, the commission, chose to do the reviews of these CTE textbooks. And again, just as a quick reminder, we're looking at Schedule A, which is an assortment of career and technical education textbooks. Immediately behind the list of the advisory panelists that you selected, you will find Section 1 reviews. They are all copied there in that section. At the end of Section 1, there were 11 books that, there were 10 books that did not pass Section 1. 7 of those books were pulled voluntarily by the publishers and did not continue forward in the process. On the very top of that review, we have put withdrawn very large so that you can identify easily those books that the publishers chose to withdraw from the process. 3 books continued on into Section 2. That was the meeting on August 15th where those publishers could present their revised content. Out of the 3 books, 2 publishing companies, 1 book, the content was re-reviewed by the advisory panelist, and that book passed on to continue into Section 2. 2 books did not change content, and the advisory panelists stood by their earlier decision that the book did not meet the criteria for Section 1. Behind the green card stock, you will find all of the reviews for Section 2. Remember, Section 2 on the rubric is the things like grade level appropriate, ease of use for teachers, additional supplemental material to reach all students, those sort of things. Behind the yellow card stock in this same section, you will find the publisher's responses to these advisory panelist reviews, so you can see all of the written responses from the publishing companies. And then the last thing that you have in this section is behind the blue cardstock, and that is the official recommendation list from the advisory panelist. That official list has just been compiled. The reviewers just finished Section 2 reviews. We've just received the publisher's responses, and that list has just been up. One of the reasons we did not bring it as an action item is we did not have that list finished in time for this meeting. It will be on the agenda as an action item for the 28th for first and final read so that it can go to State Board. But that official recommendation from the advisory panelist is there behind the blue cardstock so that you can review it between now and the 28th. Any questions about tab 6 and the advisory reviews?
Dr. Campbell.
Does all of this pertain to the current cycle we're in, the technology, everything here?
Yes, everything that you're looking at there is the Schedule A, those career and technical education books.
Any other questions for Dr. Shelton? Okay, item B for presentations are the public comments submitted for Section A. Dr. Shelton.
Yes, so you have 1 public comment that was submitted during Schedule A cycle. It is behind tab 7. Yes, behind tab 7. So that 1 comment is there. That comment was on, as mentioned in the workshop, the book Parents and Their Children. That book did not pass Section 1 and is not on the official list that the advisory panelists are recommending.
Mr. Mallory?
It appears that did you say 7 out of 10 didn't make 7 out of 10 books didn't make it? Is that correct?
Said 7 out of the 10 withdrew voluntarily at the end of Section 1 and did not proceed to Section 2.
It sounds like the screening process is working, and that needs to be. If that's my perception, if that's what's going on, that's y'all need to be commended for that. And the workers who did this, if they're screening some things out that don't need to be there, or forcing them to withdraw early, same thing. It's like fired or having to resign, same thing. And so, good job.
Thank you.
I would add that the rubric that we develop and approve, or that we approve for this, is a strenuous process, and the reviewers are well qualified, and they do look at textbooks very closely. Any other comments, questions for Dr. Shelton? And again, we'll vote on the approved list for Cycle A in 10 days on the 28th. Presentations, we're at item C. This is the second page of the agenda, and a couple of community members have asked to speak, and we are allocating 10 minutes for each speaker, and so we welcome you and are interested in what you have to say. Ms. Liverman, if you'll keep time for 10 minutes. And Ms. Susan Curley will be first of Franklin, Tennessee. Ms. Curley. Can you check and see, Miss Curley, if your microphone is on?
There we go.
Thank
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this panel for having me here this morning and allowing me to speak with you. I'm a parent, and I have a daughter who was in 7th grade last year. Prior to her entering into 7th grade, I reviewed textbooks early in 2014. Hearing some reports on the radio and other media about what was being included in social studies textbooks, I thought, surely this can't be, so I need to go down and check this out myself. So I went in and basically visited almost every day that week and reviewed materials online as well as at a site. Now, that site was only open, of course, from 8 to 5. And so I thought, well, this may exclude some working parents. So I do think that we need, as an opportunity, to provide a mechanism so parents who do work and dual working households do have that opportunity to go in and review textbooks and materials, just to expand the amount of feedback. When I submitted several pages of pictures, commentary of things that were found, I was basically told, too bad, we're adopting these anyway. The district has been told these have been approved by the state, so we are adopting them. That was somewhat disheartening because not many parents were reviewing those books. And again, I went in thinking, surely this can't be what I've heard. So I bring to this a somewhat of a unique perspective because I'm also on a school board now. So I've got that position as a school board member and also as a parent who has a child that went through this. And I'm starting to see some things start to conflict as far as the messaging and roles and responsibilities of different parties. But let me just take you through fall of 2014. My daughter enters into 7th grade social studies. And I start hearing that there is a PowerPoint that's being used in parts of Tennessee that has some questionable material in it. Actually, some outright inaccuracies and certainly religious bias. So I obtained a copy of it and started going through it and was not only shocked by what was included in it, but then also saw that several of the slides actually were submitted by CARE or contained images that were provided by CARE and the Council of American and Islamic Relations. So my understanding is that group has actually been deemed a terrorist organization by contributing funds to Hamas. So seeing that was even more troubling. Okay, so I'm coming into this just trying to understand what's there. I start asking my daughter about her class, and she says, we're not using our book. So they're not using the book that I reviewed earlier that year. They're using a PowerPoint. I became very concerned, wanted to see copies of it. Luckily, thanks to some legislation that had been passed, the teachers started to send home copies of those PowerPoints and copies of supplemental material, which was good. I do believe parents need to be able to see those. She was reluctant to send it via email, and when I called her, she said that she really felt it was proprietary because they had worked all summer scrambling as the standards had changed recently to pull together the materials for 7th grade. So I do think somewhat of an environment was created, too, where you had a number of teachers who do teach 7th grade who were looking for materials and input. So she had worked all summer, she mentioned, at Murfreesboro at a workshop to pull together materials for 7th grade in a PowerPoint. So I start going through the PowerPoint. Luckily, it was certainly not as biased as what I had seen, and that was reassuring. Yet some of the other assignments, some of the notes, it was certainly biased and bordered on religious study more so than history. I'm not saying we should not teach any religion. Religion has been part of history, but it should be presented in such a fashion that our kids are taught that sometimes cultures have competing interests, competing beliefs, and how do they work those things out? And when they can't work those things out, sometimes it does result in wars, in battles, sometimes decades or hundreds of years of battles. And I think it's only fair to present things objectively, especially in 7th grade. That is an impressionable age. Because if they learn not only what created some of these wars, but also how some of these other things were prevented and what negotiations took place, I think it's imperative for them to know that sometimes war isn't the only answer. So if we're going to teach history, let's make sure we're teaching it from a point of historical accuracy, and we present both sides and viewpoints, and we're somewhat objective. Just to give you some ideas and examples, when it refers to Muhammad and just the expansion of Islam, they talked about peacefully converting people by the sword. Peacefully convert by the sword. Whereas descriptors that are used in describing China in the different dynasties, descriptors that are used during the Crusades, are very, very different and leave a very negative connotation. Whereas one is presented very, very positive and the others are presented very negatively. So I set up some meetings with the teacher, then wound up setting up meetings with the teacher, the curriculum director, and the principal. What they told me was that they had to teach it this way because this is how it would be tested at the end of the year. And the teacher said, my very employment depends upon how these children do on this test. So I would tell you that it's not only a standards issue. It is not only a textbook and materials issue. And it is not only a testing issue. It really is all of those three things. The teacher told me she did not want to be teaching it this way. It actually conflicted with her very beliefs, but she had to. And the principal, curriculum director are sitting right there in that classroom, and they said, look, this is what we're evaluated on as a school. This is what our teachers evaluated on, and this is going to become part of these kids' grades. Now, some of the things that these children were asked to do during the year and some of the assignments absolutely conflicted with what they were even seeing on social media and on the evening news. So if you will flash back to last fall, what were some of the things that were shown on the news and in social media? Beheadings, pilots being burned. How do you reconcile with the seventh grader? They're going to see these things. That what they're reading, what they're learning in school, and what they're seeing on TV, they're trying to reconcile that. So we had a number of conversations in our home, and we looked up supplemental material that helped our child at least understand why some of these things were happening the way they were happening and why certain actions were being taken. And providing that additional insight, at least gave her some understanding. When she was asked to do a writing prompt, an English language arts writing prompt, she was given a set of notes that talked about the Quran and the Sunnah, and it listed out bullet points of each. And she was asked to do an English language arts writing assignment to explain how the Quran and the Sunnah impact the daily lives of Muslims. So this wasn't past, this wasn't historical, this is taking it to present times. So having recently discussed with our daughter, again, some of these, the other side, and she took it upon herself to use some of those notes and supplemental materials from home. Again, this was something where we were going through in depth with her to make sure she had a balanced understanding. Now, her paragraph may have been the opposite of what was on the notes, but it did not include any historical inaccuracies. She talked about public executions and why they do those. She discussed the law of Takaya, and she also talked about Muhammad marrying Aisha at a very young age, and it was Aisha's father that later on became the leader. My daughter was threatened to go to the principal's office or to be taken to the principal's office because she wrote an inflammatory paragraph. I don't blame the teacher in this one because, again, the teacher is simply looking out for her employment. She's thinking, oh, my goodness, this kid is what's going to happen with those end-of-course test scores. Our children are more than a test score, and we have placed so much emphasis on those tests that our teachers feel beholden to do and teach to them. And this was, in fact, one of the questions that was asked on the end-of-course test. Very troubling, though, is when we hear that now parents and teachers are not allowed to go in on those online tests later and see what was even asked. It's very troubling because I think sometimes we've moved so quickly in education that we've not taken time to have a common sense approach. And I do think that there are opportunities for us to engage the right partners in this and to look at different steps along the way. Make sure each person knows their role, their responsibility. Because when it comes to textbook adoption, what we hear is these have been approved by the state and staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much.
Okay, am I out of time?
You are out of time.
Okay.
And to me, this sounds like a really bad mishandling of a situation. As a principal, I just want to tell you that no more than a week ago, I had a parent concerned about the issues you're talking about. And we teach religion objectively, and we do not take sides on which religion. And we do have an obligation to teach different religions in schools so that students can understand what's going on in the world around them. But we teach them objectively and do not favor one over the other. And teachers that are teachers, at least I can speak for the ones in my building, they're skilled at making sure that it's objective and that all people in the classroom are respected, regardless of their religious views. But it certainly resonates what you're talking about. If you have any materials you'd like to give us to review, we would like to receive those.
Okay. And just, when you were talking about that, one of the things that actually passed muster, and when we say that, and this is why I believe your role is so important, is I did take a picture of one of the holidays around the world, and we are in such a climate right now, political correctness. Some people don't want us to say Merry Christmas, but, it's okay to write out the 5 pillars of Islam, and yet when in kindergarten the teacher supplement says words to know, and it lists St. Nicholas as a mythical person who brings gifts at Christmas, you have to really question what's going on.
Thank you. And if you could begin to distributing that, Mr. Mallory, if you'd like to say something, and the next speaker could be coming
Thank
up
you.
at this time.
Can I ask her a question? Is that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mallory.
And I appreciate you. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say.
This is, my only hesitation is that this is not it doesn't pertain to the current adoption cycle, but we do want to be really transparent in what we do. And so, yes, sir.
The care thing. Talk to me about what care was this on a PowerPoint in your classroom or what? That's a huge issue.
Okay, again, this was a PowerPoint that was being circulated, and my understanding is that while it wasn't in the school that my daughter is in, this particular PowerPoint was in fact used in other schools in Tennessee.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I just want to note that a PowerPoint would not be something that we deal with as a Instructional Materials Quality Commission. At our level, it's certainly a local issue.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to, I want to call up Mr. Hal Rounds for
I
his
have one
presentation.
question,
10
Mr.
minutes.
Chairman.
Okay. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mrs. Curley, for sharing with us your experience in your school district as it relates to the 7th grade social studies and how it's impacted your daughter and your family. I would assume, I guess this is a question, that you have presented these same concerns to your local school district and board, and would hope that they are attending to that as it relates to the issues you've raised. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I actually submitted, again, multiple conversations with the teacher and the principal, teacher, principal, and curriculum director. And then also submitted my concerns to board members who sit on the Franklin Special School District Board. So, again, this is a concern because I understand teachers may be given flexibility, yet when standards change quickly and we have teachers scrambling to fill that need and they're being told there is a test and 25% of it will be based upon Islam, they are going to teach to that test as long as their very employment depends upon it. And I think we're placing teachers in a very precarious position and potentially violating civil rights of students.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Dr. Robinson would like to speak.
Ms. Curley, I
Yes.
commend you for, first of all, you and the other parents having discussions with your kids. I sat up here listening to what you're saying, and my wife and I have also had discussions with our children and correct some inaccuracies in some social studies and history books. I think my concern is there are parents that aren't talking with their kids and correcting those inaccuracies. And I want to assure you that the legislature has made some changes with this commission. Before, we were basically charged with looking at the standards. There are some changes in the law, and we are looking for inaccurate information now. And so while I appreciate what the legislature has done, I don't appreciate systems blaming this commission for the textbooks that they have chosen to purchase for their system. This commission is simply adopting an approved list, but it is the local school systems that choose whether to purchase that textbook. So I think that that's important to note.
Thank you. If I may respond, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, I think that yes, I commend you for having those conversations as well. I think a lot of parents trust that everything is great and fine in our schools as long as that's what they're hearing. And how many parents have the time and the bandwidth? It doesn't mean that they're bad parents. It doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It means that based upon their household structure, work, et cetera, they may not have the time to dedicate to truly find out everything that's going in front of their children in schools. And again, that's not to say that makes them a bad parent. At the same time, parents who raise concerns should not be criticized or looked at as speaking negatively. I look at these things as opportunities for us to learn from and correct so we don't find ourselves in those same positions again. Also, with regard to locals adopting other text, I can tell you just from my position as a board member, if we ask for additional textbooks, I think that develops it seems like it's a very cumbersome undertaking right now. And the alternatives, how are those to be provided? I think that process, if that could be expedited or streamlined, and I would be more than happy to help in any way possible. But if there can be a way to identify other texts and supplemental materials that may qualify, I think that would be a tremendous solution.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad that Dr. Robinson brought that up. And when we did the social studies adoption, I guess 2 years ago, before the new law came into effect, we were, in fact, looking for alignment with standards and not the inaccuracies. And the new law is more clear, and so our role has changed. I'm glad you brought that up. Also, something the commission did that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk, right after the social studies adoption, was all the textbook review from this point forward is online. The textbooks reviews are online, so you don't have to drive and get locked out. So we're being very responsive to the concerns of the community, and we do really appreciate your presentation this morning.
Mr. Chairman, one question. Is there an appropriate committee at the State Department of Education that would be available and open to hear these concerns from local communities like we've heard today?
I'll recognize Dr. Kirk. One other thing I would mention is that there is a process. If a district decided tomorrow they wanted a new social studies textbook, they can follow the review process at the local level, submit it to the state for approval. Dr. Kirk?
Yes, we do receive phone calls and answer those calls regularly. We are open to when folks have concerns, they email and call. And then the standards review process is one that's very robust. It's just started. We're in it right now with math and ELA. It gives opportunity for all citizens to get online, look at the standards, put in their comments and suggestions for improvement, and then groups of teachers and subject matter experts take those comments and their knowledge and go through the standards to review and revise them. So that is the process.
Do members of the State Board of Education do they have the opportunity to hear from the public concerning issues like this, or is it a matter of reports coming from staff to them?
It can be done both ways. And in fact, the standards review process, while we assist with that process, it is a process of the state board.
Okay, Mr. Mallory?
Is would it be possible, or what's the process if Ms. Curley would like to be one of the reviewers for social studies? Could the department comment on that?
Me personally, I would have to go back and review the new law as to who is on the reviews. We haven't selected them since we did CTE, and so maybe one of the department members could review those that criteria for reviewers. Dr. Shelton, could you come up?
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. So I could look it up. It would take me just a second. But specifically in the law, it states teachers or content experts. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be a Tennessee K-12 public educator, but they either need to be a content expert and in some way show that, or a teacher.
So,
I'm sorry, they have to be a certified teacher. So when I say certified teacher, that could be a principal, that could be a supervisor of instruction, that could be a director of schools. So they are a Tennessee educator, but they can be a content expert. So it could be higher education, also reviewing as well.
So that may be some legislation that if we were want parent, that might be something we look at is just for parent review for legislation. Not that I'd give any hints to any state legislators that might be in the
yeah, I would just
there.
say that we don't. That's in the new law that was passed when the new commission was created. Go ahead.
I was answering the question in regards to the commission and the state level. It also has in the law that there are parents on the committees that review the books at the local level. So parents are a part of committees at the local level, but I was answering in regard to the state level and this commission's responsibility.
Thank you.
And at the local level, though, parents don't have the opportunity to review alternative text or to really suggest alternative textbooks. So that's the only place where parental feedback, it's so far downstream that it seems as though at that point it's too late. It's either a yes or a no, not here's other options to explore or consider.
Yes, ma'am. And typically there'll be, particularly with large adoption cycles like social studies or English or science, there would be there would be multiple resources to select from. It wouldn't be only a couple, but that is a point that you mentioned there that's worth mentioning.
Yes, and so when as a parent reviewing them, those were the only options presented. So even the thing with standards input, my only question or feedback on that is how many parents clearly understand how a change in a standard will translate or could translate to a change in curriculum and what that might drive in the classroom, as well as what that could drive on test. So those are just some things just from my perspective as a parent and just what I've seen and observed over the past 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mallory.
Just want to thank you again for showing up. And you had some materials to give us. And
Yes.
Again, thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I think we're ready for Mr. Hal Rounds from Somerville. Is he here?
I don't see how. Can I request a 5-minute recess?
We approved the agenda, so let's stick to that. Let's stick to our plan there today. There is some more time, however, though Mr. Mallory built in, so maybe he'll be in by there. I'm open to rearranging and have Mr. Rounds come in when he gets here. Announcements and notices: 2015 Lead Conference textbook sessions. Miss Allison Gower, Director of Content, Tennessee Department of Education, is recognized.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to make a little bit of an extended introduction and say that I'm delighted to be back in my native Nashville after many years away, and it is a honor and a privilege to serve the great citizens of the great state of Tennessee in my small capacity as Director of Content. My announcements are the LEAD conference. The dates are October 26th through 28th. I will be presenting a session on textbooks and the adoption process and how all of that works. That is for district-level leaders, principals, supervisors, etc. We also need to talk about the dates for the commission meeting in September of 2016, and I would suggest that we keep to a schedule that is close to what we have had through this cycle, and that would be for the first meeting, the week of the 12th of September, and for the second meeting, the week of the 26th. And I believe if you all can check your calendars and thank you, Dr. Shelton, and the March date, which would be sometime around the 3rd of March.
Ms. Gower, could you make some recommendations, and we be checking that and confirm that at the next meeting, or is this something that's, in your opinion, we should really set right now?
Can we confirm it?
We're talking about meeting dates for the spring.
Yep. You all can let us know next meeting. What this affects is the dates that I plug into Schedule B for that cycle. But if you all need to check your calendars and figure that out and get back to me, that's fine.
Dr. Campbell.
Can you give us some specific dates? If you say the week of, that at the next meeting, if you can give us or even specific dates, that'll help us with.
Sure.
looking at our calendar.
The reason I gave weeks was simply because if you all need some room to work on that, ideally the March meeting would be toward the first of the week, and then the first September meeting would be the first of the week, and then the September 26th meeting would be toward the end. So to give us a little time in between, but I'm sure coordinating your calendars is a little bit tricky, so we'll do the best we can for that.
Okay. We will put together some date options and email them out after this meeting and find the time that most of us can do it, and we'll publicize it at the next meeting in 10 days, if that works for everyone. Okay, thank you, Ms. Gower. Any other business from the commission? Dr. Kirk.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a lot of discussion today about the processes of the State Department, and so I'd like to just review those for clarity. By way of introduction, I am the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the State of Tennessee, and I serve on the Commission as the delegate from the Commissioner. I'm from Greene County. I was reared there. I graduated from Greenville High School. I worked in a local hospital for several years, and then in Greenville City Schools for about 20 years. Most recently, I was the Director of Schools in Greene County, where I served for 5 years. I raised a family in Greene County. I still live there. I go back every weekend. I volunteer my time, and I participate in church and family activities. I hope my grandchildren will grow up there and go to public school there. I work in the Department of Education, and I am a Tennessean. I want to, just for clarity for the commission themselves and for the audience, the purpose of standards. The state, and by the state, I mean colleagues like Dr. Shelton and myself, alongside district representatives. The state develops standards that detail what students should know and be able to do. We hold ourselves accountable to those standards by summative testing at the end of each year. These standards reflect the knowledge and skills that we as a state believe citizens should possess. All standards are officially adopted by the State Board of Education, and there is more transparency now than ever before on standards adoption, and that's a good thing. Then there's standards development and review. The social studies standards, which have been discussed here today, were developed by a group of Tennessee teachers and approved by the State Board of Education. The contents in the most recently approved social studies standards are not new, but have been reorganized. Some topics that were taught in one grade are now being taught in a different grade, while some content has been integrated throughout all of the grades. The teaching of world cultures and world religions is not new. In fact, these topics have been taught for more than 25 years. Standards are reviewed regularly. And this year, the Tennessee General Assembly, building on the governor's standards review process and in coordination with the State Board of Education, passed House Bill 1035, which set out a remarkably transparent process of ongoing standards review and revision. Social studies standards will be up for review beginning January of 2016. The review process involves Tennessee educators reviewing both the standards and public comments collected through an open online process. The review process allows for a thoughtful approach to revisions that will impact all educators and students. Standards are a list of knowledge and skills. Curriculum and pacing of the standards is developed at the local level through the creation of a scope and sequence of the standards, materials used to teach the standards, and lessons and activities that move students to mastery of the standards. And finally, with regard to textbook adoption process. Textbook adoption begins with a review of books that publishers put forward for a particular adoption. The review starts with a group of Tennessee teachers selected through an application process, reviewing the textbooks that are available for purchase in the subject areas that are up for adoption. So currently we're doing career and technical education. Once teachers are approved as reviewers, they are trained on the content so that they understand the standards and the process of review. The review is a two-step process. Teachers use a rubric to analyze the textbooks. Books are first reviewed based on alignment to the standards. If the book makes it through, it is then analyzed further, as you have heard today. If the book does not make it through the first phase, publishers have an opportunity to make revisions and resubmit. Public comments are included through this process. Once the books are approved through the vetting process by this team of teachers, they are submitted to the Textbook Commission for their approval and then on to the State Board of Education for their approval. The approved list goes out to districts, at which point the law requires local districts to establish local review teams comprised of community members, including teachers, parents, and subject matter experts to review the books. They submit their selections to the local Board of Education for approval of the books for use in the districts. All districts must adopt books, but adoption does not mean they must purchase. They may use books that were previously adopted and purchased, or they may create materials of their own. There's also a waiver process that allows districts to utilize locally vetted materials that are not on the state list. Waivers must be approved by the Commissioner of Education. It is also important to note that the process is very open, with all books that are up for adoption being available for review by the public. In summary, I would say that we do have an open process for both standards development and review and textbook adoption in Tennessee. The folks that are reviewing and approving these documents at the state level are Tennessee educators, and much of the decision-making process occurs at the local level, with local educators, parents, and the public involved in the process. I think it has been improved over time with the recent legislation, and I'm proud to work in the department and oversee this process and make sure that it's strong and done very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk. And I have an announcement. I would like to, after the next meeting, I would like to not serve as chairman going forward. My oldest son started school, and being principal of a middle school here in Nashville, one of our higher profile middle schools, obviously requires a ton of time. And now wanting to get involved more in my son's school as a kindergartner, also having a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And after having done this for a couple of years, I've really enjoyed it. I've appreciated the confidence instilled in me, but I would like for you in the next couple of weeks to consider someone stepping up and chairing this committee. So just giving that announcement that you have a couple of weeks to think about it, and we'll add as an agenda item next meeting at the 28th to elect a new chairman. So, any other business? Mr. Mallory?
I know Mr. Rounds he's coming from Somerville, and he's probably another 45 minutes out. That's a long way. But, you know.
That's really unfortunate, and sure anybody that may want to stay after and wait and meet, that might be something to do. He can also request to get on the next commission meeting with some time there.
I'll be staying.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And at this time, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.